So over the course of the last week or so, there was a massive viral anime and video game localization dialogue going on X that resulted in the absolute crash out of an industry localizer. And I wasn't gonna cover it because I had so much going on, but not only is there now time, but your boy is coming with receipts. Welcome back to Words of Paradise. I'm your host, Leon Idol. And yes, I'm sure many of y'all saw this, but we are going in depth, and I'm going to dismantle this piece by piece. So before we get into it, hit that subscribe button. I'm a nerdy news channel. I cover nerdy news every day. You all in for a good one this time. Kind of torn on this because I have a deeper understanding than most consumers about how and why this happens, but I get it. The English to Japanese 2B are portrayed almost like entirely different characters. That shouldn't happen. The same is true with Zero. Obviously, this is in regards to, Nier Automata. Now, the just self-importance, the inflated ego of this individual gets wilder as it goes on until they are full-on exposed. Because this sounds relatively fine. Like them saying they're torn on it. Because, to be fair to this individual, they do live in Japan, have lived in Japan for about 21 years, give or take, have been, teaching English and doing English localization and whatnot for like 13 years, something to that effect, when I was doing the research. I'm not going to doubt their credentials when it comes to speaking the language. I'm definitely going to call into question their authenticity when it comes to how they localize and translate. What most consumers don't really understand, or maybe not necessarily from the production side, is that there's a literal divide between the original and English versions. There are two separate things. Maybe they shouldn't be, but that's a fact. You're not meant to mix languages. Well, first of all, a couple of things here. Yes, we all do understand that. Every single weeaboo and otaku and anime fan and whatever understands that English and Japanese are in fact two different languages, are in fact impossible to do a one-to-one translation. That has never been called into question. Now, I will say the whole you're not meant to mix two languages things is bullshit. We have, for example, Spanglish, which is an unofficial language where you mix Spanish and English. That's just a common thing in certain parts of America. Also, you've got, like, certain lingo from other languages have seeped into the American lexicon. You'll see people just, like, unironically say arrivederci or whatnot because, like, we've heard it so much in pop culture. Hell, you can hear the same thing with, like, konnichiwa, adios, gesundheit, all within, like, regular English sentences. They can just throw in these random words that are a different language. So, again, yes, I'm being pedantic. I get what they mean when they say that you're not supposed to mix languages. But if you're going to be this much of a condescending asshole, I'm going to be a pedantic dick. Localizations are meant to be as authentic to the target language that you can't even tell it was a translation at all that was only created in that language from the start. I agree. That's what they are meant to be. Unfortunately, that's not what they are. And frankly, that's not really what they've ever been. And you guys have only made it worse. And this is coming from somebody who has been watching anime since the 90s when the localizations were notably worse than they are now. Jelly donuts, anyone. But yeah, this is something that has never been the case, and you are actively making worse now. The moment you begin to mix languages, i.e. turning on Japanese subs or audio along with English, whatever, to the mix, you're naturally going to begin to see differences, some larger than others. This is natural, all part of the system. Yes. Fucking duh. That's why we do it. We would like to see, again, there's going to be times when certain things cannot be translated or when certain things have to be shifted due to the nature of language. But we can still check to see if the context is the same. The overall attempt at making sure the same thing is being said is the same. That's why we watch the subtitled version even if the English is playing. To make sure you're doing your goddamn jobs. Because let me tell you, there's been plenty of times where that has absolutely not been the case. That's not to say the localization is necessarily wrong. Well, there are many times in which it is factually wrong. We have covered several of them on this show. That being said, I have also had my own beefs with certain official translations in the past, but for the most part, it's accurate. And the difference is only surface level. No. The difference is far from surface level in many of the instances. Now, I could give you guys a rundown and a list of them, but I've done that in who knows how many videos before. You can just go check the back catalog, check the streams, check other people's videos. You could get lost in the rabbit hole of intentionally wrong translations, localizations for days upon days upon days, and that's going to detract from the actual receipts we have in this one. Players are better educated. Oh, by the way, and this is when we get this right here, which shifting the conversation. This person knows exactly what they're referring to, and we got Rekka that either is obfuscating the truth, is retarded, is running. I mean, there's a lot of things it could be, but players are better educated, thus more elitist nowadays. Now, I want you to remember this is how they phrase it. Players are better educated, thus more elitist nowadays. They want to stick to the original material as close and loyal as possible instead of something based on the standards of the target language-speaking world. They make a culture for themselves, and it needs to be responded. First of all, fucking facts. Absolute agree. Here is where we see the meltdown begin. So, no Japanese proficiency necessary for Japanese to English localization. Also, consumers determine the standards for English productions because the average gamer knows best. Well, there goes my 20 plus years of studying English and Japanese, all to appease the consumer. Makes a lot of sense. That is not what the individual said whatsoever. This is why I can't tell if this Rekka folk is being obtuse intentionally, or if they are actually stupid. Frankly, I'm going with the second half because I try to never attribute to malice that which can be more easily applied to stupidity. Because if you look at his statement, players are better educated, thus more elitist nowadays. That is a very obvious sentiment of compare gamers now who are playing these Japanese-oriented video games, watching anime, reading manga, whatever it may be. Compare it now to, let's say, 1996. We've got the advent of the internet. The world is a whole lot more global. These sort of products are a lot more mainstream. Cultures have shifted and mixed a lot more. Yes, players are better educated nowadays, and due to that education, we are more elitist. At no point is he saying that there's no Japanese proficiency necessary, that, the going to Japan and studying language is, unnecessary, things to that effect. He is specifically speaking in the terms of compare the way these things were made in the past to now, and because we have a better understanding of the process, of the world, of the languages, of the characters, of the nuances, of the philosophies, the list goes on, that players become more elitist about it because they want to stick to the original material, because that's what they gravitated to that material for. So nothing about what he says is wrong, but again, she either intentionally or idiotically obfuscates it to basically leaving out the nowadays part where he's just saying players are better educated and more elitist, i.e. than, you localizers. But that was never what was said. And then, so we've got the consumer is paying for the product. So yes, you should appease the people that are paying for the product, not your ego. Again, factually accurate because this is still a business. But you wouldn't know that. This is the mask off moment. If this was some Nick Cage, John Travolta shit, this is where she goes full face off. Creatives are merely slaves to the corporate world and the consumer? No, sorry. Creatives in this business because they have a vision and want to create things. And they have to tweak some things to the rating system, but consumers do not dictate their word. Now, hold on. Creatives? That ain't what you were saying not too terribly long. Let's go back to some of your initial statements, girly. Some of your initial statements right here were, I'm kind of torn on this because I have a deeper understanding than most consumers about how this happens. You're speaking about it from a business perspective. At least that's what you're trying to say here. Most consumers don't understand, maybe not necessarily from the production side. Localization is meant to be authentic language. Right, exactly. The moment you get in mixed languages, yeah, you're trying to be academic. You're trying to be professional because that's the facade. That's not to say localization is necessarily wrong. You've got beefs with certain translations in the past. Well. If that is all true, and you're seeing it from a purely academic, business-minded perspective, then I need you to explain to me where this is coming from in terms of creatives. Because this ain't about creativity. You're not creatives. You're paid to do the job. The job of localization. The job of translation. That's not what you want to do. You actually want to create something, based on the work of others, due to some inflated sense of self-importance, some sort of inflated ego, whatever it may be. Maybe just due to your lack of creativity and inability to do something from the scratch, from the ground up. And again, I'm going to show receipts for all of this. We just giving you all the backstory right now. So we got the almighty Lolly here. Translator's job is to translate the vision of someone else for a foreign market. It is not your vision. Correct. Correct, it is not your vision. That's why this whole creatives aspect is awful strange. Then we got the dumbest hoodweeb account on the platform coming in hot with, it's not your vision either. Yeah, no shit! We don't want our vision. We want the vision of the original creator. You want to know what your boy... Now, I grew up on... Shocker, I'm a child of the 90s. Guess what I grew up on? The original Funimation Dragon Ball. Original being a bit of a misnomer there. Guess what I don't watch nowadays? The fucking Funimation Dragon Ball, because... as I was reading the manga growing up, and as I got more involved in the fan base and got more, invested in the actual scene, the community, learning about the Japanese, I realized, holy shit, the Funimation dub of Dragon Ball Z is a fucking atrocity. Now, it also doesn't help that, Chris Sabat and Shan Shim and all those dudes are fucking douchebags, but that's neither here nor there. The point is, it's just a bad localization. It's a bad adaptation. Nowadays, when I watch Dragon Ball, your boy watches it in Japanese, because it's faithful. At least more faithful by comparison. I think it's funny how you love to tell translators what their job is. You don't have a clue about it. Actually, we do have a clue about it. It's very simple. And even if it wasn't, there's a ton of simple research you can do. Also, you don't know shit about it either. I don't trust you know shit about anything considering you got BLM proudly in your bio. Stuff needs to be localized for foreign market. This isn't hard to understand. Correct. Stuff does need to be localized for foreign market. But that's not what we're talking about here. Because you are taking the idea of localization and you're really being quite liberal with it. And you still haven't responded and explained how when we can audibly hear in the Japanese dub the Japanese characters give an English rendition of the phrase Merry Christmas, why did the localizers need to localize that to Happy Holidays, even though we can audibly hear the Japanese pronunciation of Merry Christmas, or what the fuck ever. So yes, you are obfuscating and hiding behind an attempt to subvert cultural, cultural expression, we'll say. But of course, Rekka gotta come in, and she gotta go ahead and think her almighty dark savior here, the Black Knight. All these people who have no clue how the process actually works, nor we have direct access to the original scriptwriter, director, and others in the dev team to go over any and all of our work anytime. We're all working in tandem with one another. I don't believe this for a moment. In fact, I know you're outwardly lying. Now, due to the, the communication methods that we have now, due to the much faster and much more, again, global way the world works, I'm sure that in many instances, this is, sometimes true. A, this was not always true. In fact, if it's true now, it's a very new thing. And B, even then, that's not necessarily the case, because there have been horror stories and nightmare stories about that not being the case. And I have seen several of them. Remember that time Ghost Stories came out and the localizers back then said they did so poorly they got permission to do what they wanted with it? Well, it turns out it was actually rather popular in Japan before, and the author had no idea what was done overseas. Fucking liars. This is one of the most deliberate, egregious deceptions often repeated by localizers, but I feel like people who don't work in the game translation don't realize the insulting degree to which this deliberate lying to explain editor review is a whole job. It's well known that many creators never consulted on their works when they're translated or are aware of any changes. Lest we forget the I turned my childhood friend into a girl snafu. This lie is how localizers try to sway people into believing them. The funny thing, localizers often brag about the changes they make to make it different. It also tries to insulate all cases, telling people they don't know the process is a bold-faced lie. And you're lying. It's clear. The more manga and anime directors that find out about what localizers do, the less they want to do with you. By the way, this is all true. Jamie Marchi said, nay, admitted that's not true at all. Again, I've covered countless stories of most often than not, mangaka who come out and say, yeah, I didn't realize this was the case. It's kind of painful. But let's get in to the receipts. I'm going to go in some chronological order here. We're starting off in 2019. Metal Gear Solid translator explains why he changed Kojima's script. Jeremy Blustine recalls the time he was the sole translator for US version of Metal Gear Solid. It was a massive job, the sort of thing that would be the work of an entire team today, recalls Blustine, but back then, I was just one guy in the US doing his best. Now, the reason this is a story, the reason this is even worth reporting on, the conflict that arose regarding Blaustein's translation. See, Blaustein didn't just translate everything exactly as written. Along with cleaning up some of the language so that it made sense in English, Blaustein would change entire phrases, add new bits of dialogue designed to flesh out the characters. Blaustein admits that his approach may be controversial, but he believes that it's a necessary part of properly translating a title. fucking false. And again, we're talking, this is the PS1 days. This dude went in and blatantly altered the translation for Metal Gear Solid. Translation is not a science, it's an art, writes Blaustein. Fucking false. One must take liberties with the text to capture the essence of the words and attempt to recreate the feeling of the original for a very different audience with a very different background. Now, again, I think that this is inherently incorrect because there's such a thing as tone, and tone is kind of universal, but I'll touch more on that a little bit later. Hideo Kojima was one of the people who thought that Blaustein went too far. Kojima's frustration resulted in his future instances that localized versions of his script stick to the original writing as much as possible. So this dude fucked up Metal Gear Solid on the PS1 so much, Kojima had to put the hammer down. Now, anyone that's been watching me for some time, any of y'all that know your boy Leon ain't exactly a Kojima fan. In fact, I think Kojima kind of a fucking overrated prick and a half. But he's right, he's here, he's right here, he's correct. You making me defend Kojima. Yeah, the localized versions of his scripts to the original as much as possible. This certainly seems to be part of the reason why the Metal Gear Solid games and their dialogue become a little more weird after the first title. In fact, you can hear a more accurate translation of the Metal Gear Solid original script in the GameCube's Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, the remake, and the difference really is quite drastic. Again, so much for being in constant communication with the creators, with the scriptwriters, with the people that do the dialogue and the review, all of that. Obviously, that's not the case. And right here, now again, this was reported on in 2019. But let's jump a little bit further. All right, how Spirited Away changed animation forever. This was reported by Time Magazine in July 20th of 2021. Let's get to the part that matters. All right, we got this right here. Disney's partnership with Studio Ghibli and the complicated history behind it. Miyazaki was wary of foreign distribution for his films after the director's 1984 movie Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind was infamously edited by Manson International for its US release. A full 22 minutes were cut from the original film, and it was promoted as Warriors of the Wind, with posters featuring male characters who do not appear in the movie. And you might be thinking, yeah, Leon, that was 84. Times have changed. Except, they really fucking haven't if you're looking at the practices of these localizers. They've just become a lot more tactful about it, aside from when they're bragging about it on X. The distributors edited the film in such a way it's become almost like a kind of children's adventure story. There's no nuance, says Yoshika. The assumption behind the editing was that American audiences wouldn't understand the storyline, because in the States and many Western countries, the assumption was that animation was for children. The heavy editing of Nausicaa was part of the reason why the US release for Princess Mononoke was in the works. Studio Ghibli producer Toshio Suzuki sent Harvey Weinstein, who led Miramax, which was handling the film's American distribution, a samurai sword with the note, "No cuts." Now, this is where the story gets really interesting. And it's not because Harvey Weinstein didn't get to abuse any of the animated characters on account of they're not real. The movie hit US theaters in its uncut form in 1999, but did not perform strongly at the box office. Good. Now, this ain't me being some Mononoke hater, but the reason I say good is because what do we think of when we think of Princess Mononoke now? We think of it as one of the, if not the best Ghibli film out there. Now, in my opinion, that's wrong. It's obviously fucking Kiki's Delivery Service, but that's neither here nor there. Most people would probably say Spirited Away or Princess Mononoke. So that being said, if this had done far better, with people, if it had done far better at the box office, I bet it would actually have a worse perception nowadays, because people wouldn't have gotten it. There just wasn't the understanding of the cultural differences between Japan, America, the different storytelling philosophies, things like that in 1999. But all these years later, in 2026, it is a cult classic. It's beloved by anime fans the world over. It grossed $2.3 million for the initial release, and Napier says it's hard to pinpoint why the film didn't quite catch on. Well, I just explained why I think it is. But by the time of Spirited Away's limited release in the States in 2002, Napier says that Disney was more familiar with Miyazaki as a brand, and another major difference from The Princess Mononoke was that Pixar's John Lasseter, who had long been a fan of the Japanese director, was at the helm of Spirited Away's distribution and English adaptation efforts. Well, crazy how that works! You get Spirited Away, which is the only other potential contender for most famous Ghibli film of all time, at least to American audiences, And it does gangbusters. It becomes just an instant success, an instant classic, a numero uno hit. Pretty sure it was nominated for Oscars that year. I actually think it may have won Oscars that year, but that's neither here nor there. Why? Well, maybe because the guy who was in charge of the American aspect of the projects was a huge fan and knew what he was doing, and he understood the cultural implications. He respected the cultural implications. He didn't want to see changes. He didn't want to see alterations. He wanted it released in a way that actually honored the source material, honored what Miyazaki did, because he was familiar with Miyazaki's work. Alrighty, let's jump forward. Let's jump forward to July 2022. Love Hina creator Ken Akamatsu elected to Japanese legislature. Now you're wondering, what the fuck this got to do with anything? Slow down, chillin', I'm gonna tell you. So again, July 11th, 2022. Ken Nakamatsu, the artist behind the Love, Hina, and Negima Magister Negima manga, has become the first mangaka to also be a politician. He is now a member of the Liberal Democratic Party, which, by the way, don't jump out of your seats, people. In Japan, that's the right-wing party. Akamatsu ran on a platform promoting freedom of expression and artistic freedom. It included protecting creators' rights from censorship, regulations, and external pressure. Now, I'm going to give y'all 3 guesses what external pressure means. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you got it. What about this gem? I covered this in its own dedicated video 2 years ago when it happened, but let's give y'all a little refresher. Lovely complex dub writer, we made it good. This show sucked. The biggest point of contention for the dub writer involves Psycho, a trans woman who's introduced early on in the series. Early on, Risa dislikes her, citing some vague preternatural awareness that she's trans. Rather than try and maintain the original script as closely as they could, Blabber and Linty, the localizers, went on cutting things, changing context, and otherwise altering dialogue from the original translations. He even says that you can watch the English dub with the subtitles on to listen to our edits in real time. The centerpiece of the post is when Blabber is sarcastically frustrated their dub is this good, because he feels that anyone who picks up the show and enjoys it will only do so because of the dub. When discussing his dub in the context, he says, now hold on, let's read the whole thing. Frankly, having the dub come out this good in the end is a little frustrating. Anyone who watched the show as a kid and has fond memories of it and revisits the dub will think, wow, it's just as good as I remembered. No, it isn't. We made it good. This show sucked. That's your average localizer right there. That is the mentality of the average localizer. And guess what? Discotype Media did the right thing in this instance and fired his ass. So yeah, that being said, I want to remind you, anytime you got localizers like Rekka Alexiel here saying, oh, we always work with the original directors, we always work with the script writers, we have direct links to Japan. This article goes out of its way to dictate how that was not the case, how that never was the case, and then for her talking about how, these localizers have just nothing but the utmost respect for the creatives and for the original medium. Clearly not. But we ain't done, children. You might have seen this one. This one's pretty recent, from Automaton. Neon Genesis Evangelion director Hideki Anno doesn't believe creating for the global market is the way to go. Sorry, but the audience will have to be the one to adapt. Now, what did he say that actually matters? That's a headline. There could be a little bit more to it. Anno explains that making a film for a non-Japanese audience comes with some considerable difficulties, especially the language barrier. Now, I'm actually going to disagree with him, but what do I know? I'm not a filmmaker, but I'll let him cook for a sec. Works that are made through a Japanese thought process can only be understood in Japanese. Film has both visual and sound elements, so compared to other forms of storytelling, the language barrier is not that. However, lines in the script are still in Japanese, and the drama is achieved through the thoughts and feelings of the characters' experiences in Japanese. Now to that I say, sure. There are obviously going to be people that have a more intrinsic worldview, like it speaks to them intrinsically more if they are Japanese. That will probably be the majority of your fan base for your Japanese film. But I also wouldn't say that's inherent. And as a very modern recent example, Godzilla Minus One took the world by storm when it came out in 2024, to the point where we were getting Godzilla Minus Zero this year, actually, and the IMAX screening I went to. By the way, I got about a 2 to 3 week advanced IMAX screening for Minus One when it came out, right? Me and my crew were some of the early ones. We got to see it before anyone else and had to keep it on the DL. That was a fucking packed theater. I've never seen a packed pre-screening at an IMAX, which is basically an arena, And then that was just a mark of things to come. I didn't even know there was an English dubbed version until Smash JT told me a few days ago. No, the version that everyone saw, that everyone loves, that everyone loves, was the subtitle version. Why? We do understand it. We can understand the nuance, the emotions, the vibes. We understand tone. It's a universal language. How do we know? What do we do all day, every day with lesser creatures than ourselves? And by lesser creatures, I don't mean black people. I mean our pets, animals, dogs, cats, birds, whatever. We understand them, even though we don't, for very obvious reasons, speak the same language. If a dog growls, you know something's wrong. If it's yipping and happy, you know it's yipping and happy. If it's, got a little sense of, oh, yo, what the fuck's going on? You watch its body language. You listen to its vocal cues. Same can be done with cats. Same can be done with birds. Same can be done with most domesticated or nearly domesticated animals. And shit, sometimes not domesticated animals at all, like fucking gorillas and shit. So yeah, the idea that, like, because there's a language barrier, we need to change shit because we're not gonna get it is bananas. We know how to communicate with animals to some extent, an entirely different species. I think we can watch the body language of the fucking humans moving and hear the tone of their voice and get a pretty good fucking idea of how they're feeling. But anyway, back to Evangelion. The Evangelion director remarks that such works can be well received overseas as well, given that the audience understands the intentions and nuances of the narrative expressed in Japanese. Correct. However, he also says that as a creator, he can't accommodate his work to the audience. I'm sorry, but the audience will have to be the one to adapt, he added. Based! Correct! Exactly. And as localizers, it is your job to take what is in the Japanese and just make it English, that simple, with as little changes as possible. And the ones that actually want to, ingratiate themselves within the fandom, within the medium, within the community, whatever it may be, will be the ones to adapt. But you are not a creative, so shut the fuck up and translate. So we got one more little nugget for you. One more little piece of the pie. Daily Shinsho. Now this is a Japanese website, Japanese interview magazine. Obviously, it's translated, and I use that word intentionally. I had this translated via Google Translate, as in exact, one-to-one. Well, not really one-to-one, because it can't be translated one-to-one. There's going to be some errors. I'll point some of those errors out. But the point is, this isn't localized. This is translated from the original. The Demon Slayer movie decides that staying true to the original work is the right answer, while original anime struggles. Director Ito Tomihoko talks about 2025 being a turning point for anime. Now, if you guys are not sure who Ito Tomohiko is, Ito Tomohiko is the director for several of the Sword Art Online movies. So, I mean, say what you will about Sword Art, but dude made some movies. Japan, the director of the Demon Slayer movie isn't introduced. Anime is now said to be one of Japan's few export products. How have you been producing with a greater global awareness in recent years? So here's Ito's answer. Now I'm gonna do something for you. I'm gonna switch the game up a little bit. I'm gonna answer in his English translated way that was directly translated via Google Translate. Then I'm going to give you the localized version that your boy just cooks up on the spot. So he says, on the other hand, which, out the gate, you can tell that's effectively a translation error because that doesn't work in English. You don't start with an answer, on the other hand, when there's no original preposition to be contrasted to. So, yeah, if I were going to localize this, I would just cut that, leave the rest. Nothing changes. That's how you properly localize. So, on the other hand, there are many cases where being too conscious of global appeal leads to failure. What Japanese people think will be well received in the world probably won't be well received by people over there. Political correctness is strict in America, so they might think Japan is the only country that still makes the type of works that would be considered strange in North America, like girls fighting with lots of exposed skin. Now, again, if I keep that exact phrase just cut out, on the other hand, nothing changes. It would be the exact same. That is a perfect example of how localizers should localize, because nothing has changed. They just fixed what would be in English a grammatical error. Now, let's do this again, but a localized version. Just let me localize it. Pretend I just swapped it from, I read the Japanese, and it's like, I need to make this more palatable to the American ears. The question: Anime is now said to be one of Japan's few export products. Have you been producing with a greater global awareness in recent years? Excellent question, homie. There's a lot of times where being like socially conscious leads to just a crash out. What Japanese people think is going to be awesome in America probably won't be well received over there. They are prudes in America. They think, Japan is sexist and misogynist when they have girls fighting in bikinis. I mean, look at her organs. And that is how localizers localize. I hope you guys enjoyed my TED Talk. But no, like, in all reality, everything that I pulled from here, after watching the localization crash out of that Rekka gal, which, again, was bananas, going full mask off, we saw go from what was poised as an academic, professional approach to localization to try and pretend to be in the good graces or to pretend to have some sort of moral or, moral authority or, honestly, probably a credential-based authority. Oh, I've been doing this for 20 years. Appeals to credentialism, by the way, is a very easy to debunk, debate tactic. It's very easy to just dismantle that because, yeah, appeals to credential mean absolutely nothing. Credentials really mean absolutely nothing, and a lot of cases, not all of them, but a lot of cases. After making all those appeals and then going mask off with the creatives aspect, we have just information after information after news piece after news piece after interview. These are all direct statements. Everything I read, or nearly everything I read, was direct statements from the Japanese creatives themselves, and they negate almost everything that either that gal said or that the localization industry as a whole claims to believe. So yes, when we fans, whether it be anime, manga, video games, etc., when we fans say we know what we're talking about, it's because we do, because we're actually out here looking at what the Japanese have to say. It really is that simple. Like, I know plenty of weebs who took several years of Japanese in high school. I did 2.5 before I dropped out of high school as a whole. But anyway, these are just my opinions. Let me know yours in the comments down below. Let me know on X where you can find me at Bolt the Word. And please do subscribe. I'm a nerdy news channel. I cover nerdy news every day. Not always about the anime localization industry, but video games, movies, music, Magic the Gathering, you name it. Check us out on Instagram at wordsofparadise_Leon and become a member for $4.99 a month. You can join the Discord. Choose the articles we go over on a day-to-day basis. Choose the videos we react to on the daily streams. And of course, get involved with over 250 other vital idols. We are a bright, beautiful, glowing, vibrant community that I cannot wait to grow even further because we do care about diversity. Only one kind of diversity of thought. That's interesting to you. Join the Discord to subscribe. Until next time, it's all here in the Nerdosphere. This has been Words of Paradise.